Hello! Welcome to Slate Money, your guide to the business and finance news of the week. I am Felix Salmon of Axios. I am back from sabbatical. Many huge thanks to Anna Szymanski of Reuters, who stepped in for me over the past 5 weeks. Anna, you are incredible and amazing and probably better than me. And if you miss her, well, I do already as well. We're all with you on that one. But we have the old team back together. I have Emily Peck here from Axios.
Hello, welcome back. Yay!
Thank you very much. We have Elizabeth Spiers here.
Hello.
And we are going to talk about the latest tranche of Trump picks at Treasury and elsewhere and what effect they may or may not be able to have on economic policy going forwards. We are going to talk about Warren Buffett's latest letter about how he wants his money to be spent after he dies. And of course, because we have to, we are going to talk about the 6.2 million banana, because I'm back, people, so we have to talk about the $6.2 million banana. It's all coming up on Slate Money. Slate Money is sponsored this week by GiveWell. This is, of course, Thanksgiving week, Giving Tuesday week. This is the week that we want to give away lots of money because it makes us feel good and also because it's good for the rest of the planet. But there are over 1.5 million nonprofit organizations in the United States. There are millions more around the world. How do you know which ones can make the biggest impact with your donation? Well, GiveWell was founded to help donors with that exact question. They pore over independent studies and charity data, and they help donors direct their funds to evidence-backed organizations that are saving and improving lives. They have now spent over 17 years researching charitable organizations, and they only direct funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities that they find. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion. And according to very rigorous evidence, these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving, so you can find all of their research and their recommendations on their site for free. You can make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell takes no cut. If you've never used GiveWell to donate, you can have your donation matched up to $100 before the end of the year, or as long as matching funds last. To claim your match, go to givewell.org and pick podcast and enter Slate Money at checkout. Make sure they know that you heard about GiveWell from Slate Money to get your donation matched. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more.
Connect to the world with special Turkish Airlines fares. Book your flight before November 30th and take advantage of great deals. Fly to the most exciting destinations with the award-winning airline that flies to more countries than any other. Terms and conditions apply. For more details, visit TurkishAirlines.com. Turkish Airlines, widen your world.
Okay, so I'm back. I feel like I didn't really miss anything. Nothing much happened except for there's a whole new president-elect who's rolling out cabinet picks, and we got some pretty important ones. We got the most important one, probably for our purposes, which is Treasury Secretary, a guy named Scott Bessent, which everyone got excited about. We also had the U.S. Trade Rep. We had the Commerce Secretary. We had various, we had the NEC is Kevin Hassett. So we've had a bunch of announcements. And Elizabeth, I wanted to start with you since you're my politics go-to person. How important is any of this? Ultimately, in a Donald Trump cabinet, is everything just always going to be sort of A, chaotic, and B, whatever Donald Trump's whim is that morning? Or does the actual identity of who's in which seat really make a difference?
I think it makes a difference because there are certain people that he wants to impress. He's always had a big inferiority complex, and the economic picks are not, coming off of his earliest picks, which were just a menagerie of dipshits. Bessent and Letnick, they're not as extreme as some of the other picks, and partly because I think he does listen to people in the business community more than he does on other topics.
So let me just jump in immediately and say, like, if he was listening to people in the business community, I'm just going to come out and say that he wouldn't be posting on Truth Social about how he's going to immediately impose a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, who are our allies, who he signed the USMCA free trade agreement with. That's his own agreement that apparently he wants to tear up.
That was what was so fun about this week in Trump land, was that on one day this week, early this week, or late last week, we got the Bessent announcement. And everyone in the markets, in the business press was like, this is great. Bessent's very moderate on tariffs. This is good news.
He seems quite normal. He called Trump a free trader at heart, which everyone was just like, what?
And the markets calmed down, like Treasury yields fell a bit. And like literally a day or two later, Trump goes on Truth Social and says, what we're going to do is put 25% tariffs on our closest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. And everyone's like, well, so much for moderated.
The standard Bessent, and the thing that Bessent has actually written, and the standard move from the financially sophisticated Trump supporters when they see this kind of thing, is to say, this is a negotiating tactic. He's not going to do it, but by threatening to do it, he's going to be able to get something. And I think that on some level, that's true. Like it's very dangerous to make predictions about Donald Trump because literally anything can happen. But my prediction would be that, come, say, the end of Q1 2025, once he's had a minute to be able to do tariffs and that kind of thing, we are not going to have 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. This is a threat more than a promise.
Well, I would say in his mind, it's not a negotiating tactic, but what will happen, I think, practically is that a Republican Congress is going to have problems with it because they don't want to alienate their own voters.
Well, yeah, that's my question, right? Is that Congress can obstruct fiscal policy that he wants to do, but the whole point of him using tariffs as a weapon is that it doesn't need congressional approval. Why would he listen to Congress if he's not listening to his own Treasury Secretary?
He also listens to people like in volume, like if one person's telling him something, he'll ignore it. But if he gets it repeatedly, and if he feels like he's losing his own supporters in that way, then he responds to that. But he's not, I think, being strategic about any of this. I think he does not fully understand the impacts that tariffs would have. He gleefully talks about a trade war with zero awareness of what that would actually look like whenever he is pressed on it. So I think he means it right now. Like maybe there will be a moderating effect because of some of these picks, but I don't think it's in his mind a negotiating tactic.
So that's my question, right? Like, let's say that Trump wants to impose tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Are you saying that he will, so long as he wants to do it, that he will do it, and that the only way that he won't do it is if a lot of people, including a lot of his supporters in Congress and a lot of his cabinet, tells him not to? Yeah, like, what are you saying in terms of how this is going to play out in practice?
I'm saying he's a populist in a kind of nihilistic way. And if he gets a big enough backlash from his hardcore supporters, then that might persuade him. But I don't think that there's any kind of rational policy process that would change his mind, nor any single individual. I think it would have to happen, with a big collective backlash.
So if you put your neck out here, assuming that you're not going to get a bunch of hardcore MAGA types saying no tariffs, which I think is like highly likely they're not going to say that. You're saying we are going to see these tariffs?
I think we will. And then whenever, I think there will be a backlash when everything's, untenably expensive and he might roll them back. But I think he's the kind of guy who needs to drive the car into the wall to make sure that it's painful. So I think we're in for some pain there.
So Emily is shaking her head.
Yeah, I have two reasons. So, I mean, as you kind of were saying, Elizabeth, Trump does respond when there is a big backlash. So we saw that with Matt Gaetz most recently when he pulled his nomination because he realized, like, okay, he doesn't have the votes. Like, there are senators who don't like this guy. So with the high tariffs, I don't think the MAGA crowd will protest, but I do think there will be political blowback from Republican senators, probably, maybe from Scott Bessent, and we'll get to see how influential he is. We know that Steve Mnuchin was sort of like a moderating force when it came to tariffs, and he's the case that you'd make for it does matter who is in Trump's cabinet. He does sometimes listen to people. Sometimes.
Well, what we had in Trump's cabinet, remember, was Gary Cohn, who was also a moderating force as the director of the Economic Council. Now we have, is it Howard Lutnick in that role? No, Howard Lutnick
is Commerce.
Commerce. It's
Economic Council is Hassett. Yeah, and he's a tariff guy too. Oh, the other wild card I wanted to mention is last time we had Robert Lighthizer as the tariff guy, as the head of the International Trade Commission. He put through all the tariff policy. He made sure it was kind of like bulletproof and it was going to happen and it would, clear whatever litigation hurdles there were. He's a very experienced guy. Now they're putting in this guy named Greer. What's his name here? Jameson Greer.
He's just like Lighthizer's number two.
He was Lighthizer's number two, but I was on a show on the BBC, I guess it was last night. And there was some guy on the show who's a trade expert. And he was saying like Greer, yes, he was an acolyte of Lighthizer, but not necessarily as good as Lighthizer. Like when Felix went away and I had to step in and write the markets newsletter, it's not the same. It's not the same when you have like, the other one doing the thing. Like he's not as experienced. He might not be able to like get things over the finish line. Plus, I mean, these are crazy tariffs. Like we get, I think, half of our fruits and vegetables. I wrote it down, but do I need to like tell you? We get a lot of our fruits and vegetables from Mexico, car parts. Like prices would go up a crazy amount. There's no...
Yeah, I think 77% of our fruits and vegetables that are imported come from Mexico.
Yeah, like wither the avocado, right? People will freak out.
So I have two ideas that are going in opposite directions here. One is that there is this kind of intuition that if you place a 25% tariff on Mexican avocados, then the price of Mexican avocados is going to go up by 25%. And that's just not true. Like, that's not how consumer prices work. You don't have to maintain your percentage margins the whole way through the chain. So depending on the amount of money that you actually paid for that avocado in Mexico, like is going to be maybe, I don't know, a third or less than half of the price of the avocado that you are paying in your grocery store, right? So the amount that gets tariffed is not the full price of the avocado. It's like just a bit that you imported. And so the amount of the price rise is not going to be the amount of the tariff. For some things it is, right? So for like, if we're importing bitumen from Canada, the margins there are basically, 1%. They're really, really narrow.
Are we supposed to know what bitumen is?
It's like shale oil, some kind of like commodity, right?
Okay, great.
Petrochemical. If you're importing that from Canada and then you're selling it in the United States, trading it in the United States, like the trading price in the United States is almost identical to the import price from Canada. So in that case, like you slap on a 25% tariff, the price in the US is going to go up by 25%. But for things like avocados, we don't know how much the price rise would be, and we don't know how quickly it would happen. On the other hand, the one thing that we know that Trump doesn't really understand is this whole concept of supply chains and the way that all of North America is one big manufacturing location. And not just auto manufacturers,
the back and forth.
Like anyone in the manufacturing industry, whether it's Boeing or anyone, is just constantly moving, parts and supplies back and forth between Mexico and Canada and the United States. And all of the American efficiency in manufacturing goes up in smoke if you put a blanket 25% tariff on all of the moving back and forth that you do naturally as part of supply chains in manufacturing industry. So this would absolutely hobble US manufacturing. And I think at some point, given the number of CEOs in manufacturing who are cozying up to Donald Trump, they are going to be able to persuade him that this would do much more harm than good for exactly the industry that he's trying to boost here, which is domestic US manufacturing.
So there are also two other factors. I don't think it matters as much, the extent to which things are more expensive. Where it matters is where consumers notice it, right? Mm-hmm. So even if the tariffs don't mean, 25% on top of everything you buy, things are going to get more expensive. And you saw the way that particularly voters reacted to inflation post-pandemic when it was happening for reasonable reasons. But the other two factors are Trump really underestimates the extent to which some of these countries could retaliate with their own tariffs. He never acknowledges it. He was sort of threatening the president of Mexico with all this stuff a couple of days ago. And she said, specifically under the guise of, if Mexico doesn't fix their drug problem and the fentanyl problem, that's what the tariffs are about, or that's part of it. And she kind of responded, well, if America will fix their gun problem, because that's where all of our weapons are coming from, we can have that conversation. But the other thing is, if he manages to deport however many people, look at where those workers are coming from. They're coming heavily from the agricultural sector. So that's just an added cost. The cost of labor will go up inevitably. And I do think voters recognize increases in food and gas prices in a way they don't almost anything else.
I'd say two things there. I'd say one, the pandemic inflation screwed everyone's sense of prices up so much that like a 1 percentage point increase in CPI or PCE, which is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, which, are you so tired of reading that? Anyway, just a 1% increase in inflation for fruits and vegetables, which is a lot, probably won't feel like that much because we are all now used to higher prices and prices being crazy higher all the time. So even if Trump's tariffs happen and raise consumer prices, I think people won't notice because, their sense of reality and prices are a bit messed up and a bit like in flux at the moment. The second thing I would say is he did put a lot of tariffs in place on products from China the first time. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember a lot of people freaking out because the shit they buy at Walmart or Target got a little bit more expensive because the stuff was so cheap anyway. You know what I mean? I don't think people noticed.
But they were much narrower. They didn't really affect food and gas. Okay. I think that's a big factor.
I feel like I'm clear on this one that these 25% North America tariffs are not going to happen. Elizabeth seems to be saying they are going to happen. Emily, you're the tiebreaker. Will they or will they not happen?
I think they will not happen. I think they will be moderated.
So that's why I think like it, in the first instance, that's the question, right? It's not like what would the effect of them be? In the first instance, the question is just like, are they even going to happen? Because if they're not going to happen, it doesn't matter what the effect would be.
Well, I hope you're right. for everyone's sake.
I want to pay a lot of money for a piece of fruit, Felix. Do you?
I mean, what could a banana cost? 6.2 million?
When it comes to smart money management, one of the best pieces of advice is to make your money work for you. Well, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide, and you automatically earn cash back on all your purchases. That means there's plenty of opportunities to make that money work. So shop smarter, not harder, basically anywhere you go nationwide. It pays to Discover, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/credit card.
Slate Money is sponsored this week by GiveWell. This is, of course, Thanksgiving week, Giving Tuesday week. This is the week that we want to give away lots of money because it makes us feel good and also because it's good for the rest of the planet. But there are over 1.5 million nonprofit organizations in the United States. There are millions more around the world. How do you know which ones can make the biggest impact with your donation? Well, GiveWell was founded to help donors with that exact question. They pore over independent studies and charity data, and they help donors direct their funds to evidence-backed organizations that are saving and improving lives. They have now spent over 17 years researching charitable organizations, and they only direct funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities that they find. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion. And according to very rigorous evidence, these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving, so you can find all of their research and their recommendations on their site for free. You can make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell takes no cut. If you've never used GiveWell to donate, you can have your donation matched up to $100 before the end of the year, or as long as matching funds last. To claim your match, go to givewell.org and pick podcast and enter Slate Money at checkout. Make sure they know that you heard about GiveWell from Slate Money to get your donation matched. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more. Let's move on, because we really should talk about how much could a banana cost anyway. Emily, what's the answer?
Felix, if you tape the banana to a wall, it can cost as much as $6.2 million, apparently. And according to you, and I'm sorry, to you alone, this makes perfect sense, because there was an art auction and an artist who sold an artwork that was a banana taped with duct tape to the wall. Everyone has seen the photos by now, and it's sold at auction to a crypto rich guy named Justin Sun for $6.2 million. And there were so many headlines about it. And you were on sabbatical, and I was like, where is he? I need to know what to think about the multi-million-dollar banana. So,
and I actually went so far as to like slack you from sabbatical and being like, the discourse around this banana is so unbelievably dumb that I will literally come back to work just for the sake of this fucking banana. And
not all heroes wear capes.
The number of like intelligent articles that were written about this sale is almost exactly zero. And the number of like spectacularly stupid articles that were written about it is like infinite. And that phenomenon alone is fascinating to me. And it's a little bit Trumpy.
You sort of have to explain why the takes are so bad. Like, what are the takes?
I will get to that in a minute, but I just want to like start off by saying this concept of like normalizing scorn and prideful ignorance. And I don't know anything about this, but I know that this is stupid. It's kind of Trumpy in its own way. And I saw so much of that. And I saw so many people saying like, oh, this is a sign that this is stupid. And as though they understood it, even though they kind of knew that they didn't understand it. So let me go down the list to answer Elizabeth's question. Let me go down the list of the sort of objections to this artwork selling for $6.2 million and just kind of talk a little bit about why they don't make a lot of sense. And Emily and Elizabeth, feel free to provide your own. But the first one is very much just, it's a banana. I can buy a banana for 19 cents. Why would I pay $6.2 million for a banana, right? Which is, it's basically denying the whole concept of art having value, right? The whole point of art having value is that you take things that don't have a lot of value or don't have a huge amount of intrinsic value, a little bit of oil paint, a bit of canvas, you mix them together in like a new and interesting way. And then suddenly someone is like, oh, wow, that's really valuable. I want to pay for it. If you don't have an objection to paintings selling for $6.2 million, and, you know, in exactly the same auction season, we had a Magritte selling for 127 million or something. We had a Rocher selling for 68 million. Like, we had like very expensive paintings selling and no one blinked an eye. If you don't have an objection to paintings selling for that much when they are also selling for way, way more than the value of the materials that went into them, then it's a bit weird to say, well, this is worth more than the value of the materials that went into it, and therefore it's stupid. That's like the first objection. But there are others. Like, there was this objection that Justin Sun, who bought the banana, said that he was going to eat it, which is funny, right? And this is actually one of the reasons I think why people hated it so much, is because people don't like the attribution of serious financial value to comedy. Maurizio Cattelan, the artist, he works in a comic vein, right? He's one of the few artists who's not a self-serious artist. He's a comedian. And the name of this work is Comedian. Cattelan is always described as a prankster. This is relatively rare in the art world. And so when Justin Sun like buys into the comic premise of the work and says, I'm going to eat the banana, that is, again, like incomprehensible to people, and they don't understand that is just, it just makes the work even funnier. It doesn't destroy the work in any way. Like the whole point is the work is the work. The work is the right to be able to tape a banana to a wall and have it be the artwork, you know.
But I have that right now. I
No,
can
you
go
don't.
downstairs and tape a banana to a wall for free.
Yes, but it wouldn't be the Maurizio Cattelan artwork called Comedian, right?
Well, what's the difference?
The artwork is the concept, which they did like 3 editions of it. So this is not the only one. And it just basically gives you instructions for doing it. And it's,
Certificate.
basically, yeah. So
yeah. So what the real thing that he's paying for is the certificate of authenticity, right? That's the thing that is changing hands. That is the thing that makes it a genuine Maurizio Cattelan artwork rather than just a banana duct tape to the wall.
Okay. That I think I didn't understand until maybe even last night, that in addition to the banana and the duct tape, you get like you get some kind of certificate or something and some kind of object to certify that you have an expensive thing, which is like all that artwork kind of is. You get an object that signifies that you have an expensive thing, I guess. But in this case, it was a banana.
it's not the original banana anyway, because that, the work was presented in 2019.
Right.
So the banana
Exactly.
itself
So like,
is sort of...
this is the thing that really annoyed me about the people saying, "Oh my God, he's going to eat it." Is like, what do you want him to do with it? Just throw it in the compost? Like that's better? The banana is going to decompose, so like, why not eat it? Like,
well, I mean, the
so
whole
much
thing
of
is
this
like,
just
why
not
would you
thought
spend
through.
$6 million for something that you can eat and be done with? I think that is the issue people had. It's really hard to grasp the idea of conceptual artwork. Like, I understand what you're saying. Like a painting is just the materials don't cost a lot, but then we ascribe a lot of value to it because this guy, painted it 200 years ago. But like a painting you can see is this beautiful permanent object that you always can have, whereas a banana is not. So that, I think, is a lot of it.
But the banana is, like, this is the whole point about the conceptual work, right? Is that precisely because it's a conceptual work, the banana lives as a meme in our minds, even now that Justin Sun has eaten it. Like, it lives on. It's still an artwork. It's still funny. It's still a thing, right? So the artwork, Comedian, the thing that he bought, rather than the physical fruit, does continue to exist. And it can be exhibited, in various different configurations. Certainly, like, one of the more interesting exercises you could do would be to compare and contrast the way that it was exhibited at Sotheby's versus the way that it was exhibited at Art Basel Miami Beach. And those two ways were kind of interestingly different. No one really did that.
There's an analog here for a work that I think people do consider pretty serious. It's an artist named Felix Gonzalez Torres, and he did a work called Portrait of Roth in LA. And I forget the concept about it, but it was a statement about the AIDS crisis. And it's a pile of candy. And it's been displayed at the Art Institute of Chicago. And the work is designed so that visitors can come in and they can take a piece of candy.
You're right. Like, Felix Gonzalez Torres is a famous conceptualist artist, and that piece is a very famous piece of his. And, it's all about the idea of his lover, like, wasting away over time. And also about the transubstantiation of food into flesh, because Felix was a Catholic. And there's a piece up at the Royal Academy called An Oak Tree by Michael Craig Martin, which is also about that, which is a glass of water on the shelf that the artist claims he has transubstantiated basically into an oak tree. And it looks like a glass of water, but in fact, it's an oak tree. Like, conceptualism has been around a long time. You can date it back over 100 years to Marcel Duchamp taking a bottle rack and saying, like, this is an artwork. That was in 1914. We had Sol LeWitt showing work at Paula Cooper Gallery in 1968, which was just, I'm going to give you the instructions for how to draw lines on your wall. You are going to have to find someone to draw lines on the wall, or you're going to have to just draw the lines on your wall yourself. But the instructions for how to do it are just as much a part of the work as the actual lines on the wall themselves. And that artwork was, an artwork that people bought the instructions for creating it rather than the object, right? And all of this is over 50 years old. And the thing that really strikes me is, are we really only just learning about this now?
A lot of people are, though. And your point about the Trumpiness of it is valid, but you have to sort of consider that a lot of people don't even like anything that's abstract. There was a famous Spy magazine article titled "My Kid Could Do That," and they had a bunch of children paint a lot of abstract stuff, and they hung it in a gallery, and they asked some professional art critics to come in and evaluate it.
Yeah, but that's my point, right? That was like the 80s. When the Tate Gallery bought the Carl Andre quote-unquote pile of bricks in 1972, there was a big controversy about it, but that was 1972. I feel like we should have moved on from that kind of level of discourse at this point, but we haven't, and we seem to be moving backwards.
I honestly can't believe that you don't understand why people would make fun of a banana taped to a wall that cost $16 million. Like, how are you not at least grokking that journalists wouldn't quite get it? I mean, you, who still probably would argue that cryptocurrency makes no sense and Bitcoin being worth nearly $100,000 makes no sense because it has no inherent value, but at the same time think that conceptual art has some kind of value that's worth millions and millions of dollars.
So this is my point, right? Is that if you want to make the case that the entire art market is a ludicrous clusterfuck of money and FOMO and hubris, you can totally make that case. And you can talk to how on earth is it that an Ed Ruscha just sold for $68 million? And you can talk about the Marcel Duchamp piece that just sold, which was a shovel that sold for $3 million. Okay? It's just a shovel. It was made in 1964. He called it In Advance of the Broken Arm. It was sold by the estate of Joe Cassuth, who's also a conceptual artist. And so it's conceptual artists all the way down. And the number of people complaining about, isn't it ludicrous that a shovel just sold for $3 million, is zero. My point is that no one is making the case that you're making, that this entire edifice of modern art and conceptual art is bullshit. Maybe there are people in, the New Criterion or somewhere making that case in using many words. But the thing that irks me about the banana discourse is that it is so focused on this one piece, when in the context of the entire art world, that one Maurizio Cattelan piece selling for $6 million is not particularly interesting or noteworthy. The thing that no one seems to have pointed out, except for one person called Felix Salmon at Axios, is that Maurizio Cattelan's auction record is $17 million, right? It is not surprising that a Maurizio Cattelan might be worth $6 million when we know that a Maurizio Cattelan can be worth $17 million. And this is Maurizio Cattelan's most famous work.
You have all this niche knowledge that everyone writing about this just doesn't have. I think this must happen it happens all the time.
Here's a rare instance where I will agree with Felix. Partly because I love Cattelan, but he had a big Guggenheim exhibit several years ago where all of his work was strung from the ceiling. And just to give, listeners, if you're not familiar with the artist, as Felix said, he works in a comic vein. Most of his stuff is not conceptual. It's concrete, it's tactile.
My favorite, it's all a little bit conceptual.
Well, what I mean.
Like for instance, one of his famous pieces is a solid gold toilet that he installed at the Guggenheim, right? And you can say that it's the toilet, but the concept is the important thing.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite pieces is called Daddy Daddy, and it's a Pinocchio that's just face down in a pool. And they put it at the bottom of the pool in the Guggenheim during that period. But if you don't know who this guy is or why he might do a work like this, I can see where it would seem a little bit ludicrous, but the people who are writing about this should understand that.
Exactly. If you're going to write about Maurizio Cattelan, you should know who he is. I feel like that's table stakes. I will say that as you go up the level of sophistication, the complaints don't go away, right? So people who do know about who Maurizio Cattelan is, one of the complaints that I've heard about this piece is, but this wasn't him being serious. This is just some dumb thing that he came up with at the last minute for Periton at Art Basel Miami Beach. And this isn't a serious Cattelan piece. This is just a joke Cattelan piece. And I feel like that just misses the point of Cattelan entirely.
I would agree with that.
And then one level beyond that, you get people saying this is not an actual ratification of the value of a Cattelan because it was bought by a crypto bro who has no idea what he's talking about, and he's only 32 years old. And the guy who was like the underbidder on the Beeple, that's NFT that sold for 69 million. And so like this is just done crypto sideshow more than it is an art story. And there was this whole weird parallel controversy about a meme coin that was associated with the work, which the head of NFT at Sotheby's created this meme coin that was at one point worth like $250 million, which is obviously much more than $6.2 million. Like, there is a bunch of crypto bubbleliciousness surrounding this work. And I do think that did contribute to the scorn with which it was received. But also, I think there is just like we're bringing scorn back these days, and people feel much more comfortable being scornful about things than they did even a year ago.
I don't think so. I think every so often a piece of art rises to the public's consciousness, and we all realize for a moment, like, some people have so much money, they can spend it millions of dollars on like a funny concept joke thing. And I can't afford to buy avocados anymore or whatever. Like, it's just so outrageous, right? From just like a populist kind of perspective, that there exists these objects that have no like actual, no one needs them really. I mean, you could argue people need art, but like—
You're saying that Justin's son is Marie Antoinette, basically.
Yes. And I think every so often there's, some Marie Antoinette moment and everyone is like, what the hell is happening? Why do some people have so much money? I don't have a lot of money. This is bullshit. And journalists writing these stories are people who think that, because we all know how much journalists make. It's not a lot, despite what people tell me when they email me. So it's really easy to understand why there was a total freak out over a very expensive piece of art that is just a banana taped to a wall. Also, I wanted to say, my other joke that I wrote down is, this is how much fruit will cost if Trump gets to impose his tariffs. Thank you very much. This episode is brought to you by Public.com. Did you know you can lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at Public.com? The Federal Reserve announced another rate cut, and there could be more rate cuts this year and in 2025 as well. That's good news if you're looking to buy a home, but it might not be so good for the interest you earn on your cash. So, if you want to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment-grade bonds, check out Public.com. It only takes a couple of minutes to sign up. And once you lock in your yield, you can earn regular interest payments even as rates decline. Lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at public.com/Slate Money. But remember, your yield is not locked in until you invest. Brought to you by Public Investing, member FINRA and SIPC. As of September 26, 2024, the average annualized yield to worst across the bond account is greater than 6%. Yield to worst is not guaranteed. Not an investment recommendation. All investing involves risk. Visit public.com/disclosures/bond-account for more info.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Let's leave bananas behind and talk about this whole conception of people have so much money that they don't even know what they're going to do with it. And I am an old, as we all know. I've been around on this planet a long time. I am old enough to remember that for basically my entire formative years, the richest man in the world was this man named Warren Buffett. And he was the poster child for being ludicrously, improbably, wildly wealthy. And he's back in the news because, as we have discussed on this show, I think just a few months ago, he has decided that he is going to give his 3 kids the job of giving away his money after he dies. And go back and listen to that segment. We will have a link to it in the show notes if you want to hear me rant about how completely stupid that is. But we're not going to talk about how completely stupid that is. I think we have a couple of new things to talk about because he put out a letter on BerkshireHathaway.com this week explaining the logic of that decision. And one of the more puzzling parts of the decision was that he's going to require all three of his children to sign off on any grant that gets made from this trust. It has to give away well over $100 billion. No one knows exactly how much it's going to be until Warren Buffett dies. It could be $200 billion. It's going to be an insanely enormous amount of money they have to give away. And they won't be able to give away a single cent unless they can all agree on where that cent is going. And these three kids are incredibly different from each other. You can almost not imagine three kids who are less aligned sort of ideologically and in terms of how they live and how they think. So getting them to agree on this is where we should spend $100 billion is going to be incredibly difficult. And it's a recipe for stasis and just not giving away anything at all. And Buffett addresses this objection in his letter. He's like, a lot of people have written to me saying, this doesn't make any sense. What the fuck are you doing? And his reason for doing it is objectively batshit and one of the craziest things I've ever seen come out of Warren Buffett's mouth. Like, one of the things that you do when you read Warren Buffett's letters is you kind of nod along and go, that's really common sense. That's really common sense. And this thing, you're like, wait, what?
So what's the reason? Explain.
Emily, do you want to try and explain, or do you want me to do it?
Well, he says that the reason he wants all three of his kids, which can we just say they're 71, 69, and 66 years old, named Susie, Howie, and Peter. They are not kids or children. Anyway, before they can give away money, the three have to agree on where they're giving it or whatever. They have to be unanimous. And the reason is because it makes it easier for them to say no. So if someone goes up to 71-year-old Susie and says, I think she's the 71-year-old, and says, we really want you to give $1 billion to the Banana Foundation because the price of bananas has gotten so high in Trump's America, et cetera. And she can say, oh, I really wish I could, but Howie and Peter would never go for this. So Warren Buffett's reasoning is that it makes it easier for them to say no because they can just have this excuse, much like we've all used in our work days where we say, oh, I would love to make that change, but my editor won't let me. It's kind of like a similar kind of thing. So that's his reason. And I guess it's objectively batshit is what Felix is saying.
It's part of the reason why it's batshit. I've had to, I've had to ask billionaires for money before when we're raising money for companies. And they all have a whole class of people that are usually called donor advisors who advise them about where to put their money. So if the point is he wants to give them a mechanism to say no or to blame it on somebody else, that already exists.
Yeah, every single foundation in the world, like all three of these children have been running foundations for decades. We can argue about whether any of these foundations have been particularly successful or have changed the world in any meaningful way, but they've all been doing it. They've all been receiving these requests for decades. And the idea that after all of these decades of running, large foundations and being asked for money on a regular basis, they have no ability to say no, and they need to be protected from these requests by this unanimity requirement it is objectively insane.
But so let's play armchair psychologist, and delve into the real reason Warren Buffett is wanting this unanimity thing. Obviously, has never seen Succession or read an article about Rupert Murdoch and his children. Setting that aside, like, what is going on?
One of the things that's going on, and Buffett has written about this in the past, is that he admires philanthropy. He thinks it's a high and noble calling. He appreciates that it's not easy. It's actually quite a difficult thing to do. And he basically has said, look, this is not what I'm good at. I am not a philanthropist. My ability to work out where money should go is constrained and limited. And insofar as I have given away a lot of money over my lifetime, I basically just outsourced all of that to my friend Bill Gates, which is true. Like, he has given the Gates Foundation an absolutely enormous amount of money. And to his eternal credit, he didn't just say, I'm going to give the Gates Foundation a lot of money. He said, I'm going to give you guys $4 billion a year, and every year you're going to have to give away that $4 billion. You can't just put it into the endowment and sit on it and wait for like an opportunity to come up. You need to find a place to spend that $4 billion every year. And they did. And it really turbocharged the work of the Gates Foundation. It effectively doubled the amount of money that they gave away every year. So he did do a good job of giving away like $4 billion a year, but he did it by basically just phoning up Bill Gates and saying, can you do this for me? He, for various reasons that various people have speculated about that may or may not involve Jeffrey Epstein, he has decided that he no longer wants the Gates Foundation to be in charge of giving away the residual fortune that is left over once he dies. And instead, he's going to give that job to his kids. And that is just some weird dynasty shit, because no matter how bad you think Bill Gates is giving away money, and I would argue that he's actually quite good at giving away money, no one in their right mind would think that like some weird Cerberus three-headed monster of Howie, Susie, and Peter Buffett are going to be better.
You said it was a dynasty thing. So this is just Buffett at 94 years old really thinking about legacy and dynasty?
So he explicitly does not want to be a dynasty, right? He explicitly says in this letter that he wants his 3 children to give away all of the money before they die.
But it does seem like if he really didn't want to do the dynasty thing,
he wouldn't give them the money.
Give the kids the money. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like he's really actually subconsciously probably he doesn't want to leave this earth and not leave his kids his wealth. That's all. And that's why, and maybe he wants them to stay close to each other. I'm trying to read Buffett's mind in the most positive way. Like he wants the kids to have a nice relationship.
Yeah,
although I don't think this is going to breed a nice relationship.
If you want to poison the relationship between the 3 kids, this is the best way to do it. This is the way to go. Sure.
Yeah.
There was one good piece of advice in the letter, though, and I say this from when I was writing the Pay Dirt column for Slate. 90% of my questions were about inheritance, and they always involve family disputes, and some of them are insane. Sometimes the parents would say, I want to cut my daughter out of the will, but I don't want her to know until after I'm dead. Like there are also just people engineering this drama. And so he says in the letter, before you sign your will, you should make sure that your children read it so that you can deal with any confusion or acrimony before you go and it doesn't turn into chaos and then nobody knows what you wanted and nobody has a chance to make their case. And that is actually good advice.
I thought that was good advice too.
No, this is very good advice. And specifically the before you sign it bit. And Buffett says that, and this is another piece of good advice. He says, like, I update my will every couple of years. I'm like, that's smart. Like, there's no reason why you should only have to update it once every 20 years, like the rest of us. But also this idea of show your beneficiaries what you are going to sign before you sign it and have a conversation with them rather than, it's not just rather than them finding out only after you die, but it's also rather than you just like putting together a will and then sending them an email saying, dear children, this is my new will. Mm-hmm. Love, Dad. Bring them into the process when you are doing it rather than presenting it as a fait accompli.
But then is there if you're the parent showing your kids the will, do you have like some deep-seated fear that then the kids will root for your death so they can receive the money and or property that you are telling them you're going to give them? Like, are you afraid of that a little bit?
But they're going to do that even if you don't show them the will, right? They assuming they assume that they're going to get something.
Assuming they assume. Right. But you got to balance it so they're still like in your lives. Like if you're like, this is my will, this is what you're getting, maybe some of the kids, your fear will be like, okay, I'm getting a lot of stuff. I don't need to deal with you, Dad, anymore. Warren Buffett, you're such a pain in my butt, but I've been kissing your ass for the past 30 years, waiting on these millions and billions of dollars. Now I know where you are and what I'm getting. Peace.
That's why you revise your will every 2 years, so that if they peace out, you can change your mind.
There you go. Okay, so that's good advice. I need to ask both of you, if you were a billionaire, how would you distribute your wealth while you're alive? And then in your will, is it really that hard, corollary question, to give away this money? Feels like it's not hard to give away money. But that's just me, someone who doesn't really actually give away any money.
I do think that people without billions of dollars always underestimate how difficult it is to give away billions of dollars. And, this is a standard, like, Emily is making faces at me going, how hard can it be?
How hard could it be? Just write a check and send it to your neighbor. There, done.
No, but the point is, if your neighbor gets a check for $1 billion, then all you're doing is you're giving them that problem. The problem of actually giving away the money, of actually putting that money to use, is a real problem. And people are lauding Mackenzie Scott, for instance, for just writing massive $100 million checks to various organizations. But really all she's doing is she's outsourcing that problem to other people, right? These organizations then find themselves with $100 million endowments, and then they need to work out how much of that are we going to keep in investments, how much are we going to give away, how much are we going to give away per year, and so on and so forth. The actual putting that money into good use in the field is surprisingly difficult, and the most effective way you can do it, weirdly in some way, and you're allowed to do this, and some people do, is to just give it to the government and say, well, the government's in charge of spending the public's money. This is, I don't need this money anymore. It's not my money anymore because I'm dead. So give it to the government and the government can spend it. No one does this. Or 3 people a year.
That one mystery guy. That mystery guy who paid a lot in death tax that we talked about a few weeks ago.
But so if you give money to the government, given that the government is running at a massive deficit every year, for a fact they're not just going to sort of put it in an endowment and twiddle their fingers and wind up, hiring a bunch of expensive consultants who wind up spending it all on the luxury hotels and not actually doing anything good with it.
What if you just divide it up and send it out to a lot of people? We're always talking on this podcast about give people money, give people cash. That's the best way to do it. That people know what they need money for, so give them the money. So what about that? What about just send out checks?
Yeah, we had Rory Stewart on this show from Give Directly. And yeah, I think that if you really want to make sure that the money actually gets distributed to people who need it, then Give Directly should be very, very, very near the top of your list.
Right. Or you can just give directly yourself. Just go outside, go into New York City, start handing out hundos for everybody.
That doesn't scale, Emily.
There is a difference too between allocating funds to a foundation and giving directly to a charity. So a lot of what Mackenzie Scott has done is to give directly to the organizations. So she's written big checks to, I think, Planned Parenthood, several HBCUs, and they know how to spend that money because that's what they exist to do.
But no, Elizabeth, if you look at what the recipients of that Mackenzie Scott money have done with it, she very explicitly does not put any strings on it, and she very explicitly does not say you need to spend it. And most of them have, to a greater or lesser extent, created some kind of a permanent endowment out of that cash.
Really?
That's not a bad thing, though.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying they're not giving it away.
A lot of these orgs don't give away money. Like Planned Parenthood provides services, right?
Right. Or it's not being spent. It's not being spent in the real world. It is being invested into securities and being put into hedge funds and enriching hedge fund managers. It is not just going out there and being spent on tuition for students at HBCUs.
Wait, can I just say a few more things about this letter? People should read the letter because it's really interesting. He has this line about how his kids aren't preoccupied by wealth, which is a thing only rich people say. We're not preoccupied by wealth, which is hilarious. It's after I ate Thanksgiving dinner this week, I will not be preoccupied by food. You know what I mean? It's and the other thing is the letter also brings up bananas. So across the 3 segments, bananas are a commonality. Warren Buffett says, because he has not stepped on any banana peels, he remains alive today. You're welcome.
The banana is everywhere.
I'm sorry. I had it all written down. I needed to get all the jokes out.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
I think we just need to move on to a numbers round. Emily, what's your number?
It's 26 days. That's the amount of days from Black Friday, which is the day after Thanksgiving, to Christmas Eve. That is the quote unquote official holiday shopping season. And this year it is the shortest possible holiday shopping season we can have. And retailers were worried about it. But Ryan Cummings and Neil Mahoney at Stanford University, which maybe you've heard of, they're economists. They did this work of looking at retail sales growth and comparing it, when we have the short holiday shopping season, 26 days versus the long one, 32 days, and all the days in between, and found that it doesn't really matter. Everyone kind of spends the same no matter how long the official season is. Retailers these days start the holiday shopping season in August. So everyone has plenty of time to buy stuff. And I also, in writing about this, learned about Franksgiving, that time when Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved up Thanksgiving to the third Thursday in November, not the fourth, causing chaos throughout the land. Democratic states were like, that's a great idea. They moved Thanksgiving, but the Republican states did not move Thanksgiving. So there were two Thanksgivings in America, two Americas with two Thanksgivings. Nobody liked it. Everyone was upset. The farmers were upset. It was like a whole thing.
No one was grateful.
No one was grateful, yes, for FDR's efforts. And he abandoned them pretty soon after.
Elizabeth.
So my number is 3.8. And this comes from a Washington Post story done by their data journalism department, where they took all this data from AmeriCorps to sort of figure out where people were the happiest and what activities they were the happiest in. And what interested me was the least happy places for people. On a bus was a 4.1 out of 6. Your workplace was 3.9 out of 6. And a bank was 3.8 out of 6. Apparently the banks are the most miserable places.
But they give out free lollipops.
I'm going to the wrong banks.
You get a free pen sometimes if they don't have them on the little string.
I'm definitely going to the wrong banks. My number is 9. I don't think you guys have talked about this while I was off on my sabbatical. But as of January the 5th, that is the amount of dollars that it is going to cost people to drive into Manhattan. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, after killing congestion pricing, has unkilled it. And it has been signed off officially by Mayor Pete. And so it's going to happen. And it is happening at a lower price point than originally intended. It was originally meant to be $15, raising $1 billion a year, because it had to raise $1 billion a year. And now it's going to be $9, and it's going to raise about $500 million a year. And no one quite knows how that works in terms of the bond issues and the capital, what stuff. But even though it's modest compared to initial plans, New York City is actually going to have the first ever congestion pricing plan in the United States.
Why did she change her mind again? Do you know why? I don't understand.
Yes, we know why. We know why she did this. No one will admit why she did this, but we know why she did this. She did this because Hakeem Jeffries twisted her arm and said, this is deeply unpopular in various congressional districts that neighbor New York City. Can you please kill it? And then the minute the election was over, he was like, well, okay, the election's over. You can do this now.
Do you think it made any difference in the election? The Democrats still lost the majority.
I think if you actually, weirdly speaking, if you look at those congressional districts in, roundabout where you live and in Long Island and stuff like that, they didn't go as red as people had feared. So maybe it made a tiny bit of difference. I have no idea.
Oh, well, can't wait to spend $9 to come into the city by car.
When was the last time you came into the city by car?
It's been a while. Who can say?
Who can say? Okay, well, that is it for us this week, unless you are a Slate Plus member, in which case you will get to hear all of my, I'm going to use the word I hate, learnings from vacation. Mainly, number one learning being anything I can do, Emily Peck can do better. Thanks for listening. Thanks for emailing us on slatemoney@slate.com. Thanks to Jessamine, Molli of Seaplane Armada and Cheyna Roth for producing. And we will be back next week with even more Slate Money.